For this DIY I used an old pallet and used the reclaimed wood to make my sign. Instead of using a crowbar and pulling the pallet apart, I just used a saw and cut the pieces out of the pallet. I just found this a lot quicker and easier. So for this first sign I cut 8 pieces of wood out. I then bought some pieces of hardened aluminium. I got a 2-metre piece of this for about £7, and this is actually the only thing that I bought for this DIY. And I just cut this aluminium down so I could use it to screw all of my pieces of board to hold the sign together. So I'm just marking out on this aluminium where I'm going to make holes in it to screw the pieces of wood to. So here I'm just using my pillar drill to drill the holes out of the aluminium. This aluminium is pretty strong, but it's really easy to cut and drill. I also countersunk the holes in the aluminium as well, but you don't have to do this, just makes it a little bit neater. And then I found some screws in my garage to hold it all together. So here I've made sure my pieces of wood are face down and all lined up, and I'm just going to screw the pieces of wood to the aluminium. As you can see here, I've already started to screw them together. I'm just using some PVA glue. You could use wood glue, but I find that PVA glue is pretty much the same thing. And I'm just running this along the edges of the pieces of wood before I screw them together. And I just find that when this glue dries and the board is all held together with screws, it just stops it being a little bit floppy. As you'll be able to see in a minute, I picked this board up whilst the glue's still wet, and the aluminium actually just bends. So the glue helps surprisingly to keep it all solid when it's dry. So I've just flipped this board over, and as you can see there are some small cracks in between the wood that I just want to reinforce with some glue. So I'm just running some glue along and wiping off the excess, and then when this dries it will be hard as a rock, and obviously the aluminium will keep it all together. I'm now drawing out my design for the shapes and letters that I'm going to put on my sign. I'm drawing this on Illustrator, and then I'm going to be 3D printing them on my 3D printer that I've got at home. But obviously this isn't readily available to everyone, so you could probably just find some pre-cut wooden letters off eBay or Amazon, and you can make your own sign out of those, or you could just paint the letters on if you want to do that as well. So here are all my letters printed out. As you can see, this board underneath is the one I have been working on in this video, and on top I've got another board that I was working on, which I actually think looks better for this design with the pieces of wood going landscape rather than portrait. And I've got all my letters laid out that have been 3D printed exactly where I want them on the board, and now I'm going to glue them all down. So because these are printed in plastic, I am going to be sanding them down just so the plastic adheres a little bit better to the wood. And I'm actually going to be using brush-on Gorilla Glue to stick these letters down. When making this video, I found that this glue was so strong, once the letters were stuck down, there was no budging. So if you're going to be using this technique to glue 3D letters on your board and you're using this glue, then be very careful, because as I said, once you've stuck these down with Gorilla Glue, they are not moving. This obviously took quite a while, but like I said earlier, you can just paint these letters on. And that is pretty much it. These pieces of string that are tied around the board were actually tied for support when the glue was drying, but I actually think it looks really nice and rustic kept on the board, so I've kept them on. I just think it looks really nice and rustic for a lovely farmhouse Christmas theme.